My name is Greg Schmidt, and I would like to welcome everyone to the Survey Cooperative Agreement Notice for Town Hall meeting. I want to say first off that I'm absolutely delighted that our draft can is out on the street. This represents many months of very hard work by quite a dedicated team. And I want to give particular acknowledgement right now to Dr. Amanda Nam, who led this effort from NASA headquarters and put a particularly large amount of work into it, resulting in the document that all of you have now seen. I'd like to make a few other introductions, talk about what this meeting is going to be about, and then we'll start. So, first of all, I want to introduce my deputy director for Survey, Christina Gibbs, and then I want to introduce the three people from headquarters that you'll be hearing from a little bit later. Amanda Nam, I've already mentioned, Jake Bleacher, and Sarah Noble. And then I also want to acknowledge that a number of other people contributed significantly to development of this can, and I particularly wanted to highlight Julie Robinson and Betty Siegel. So, but many others as well. So there will be three parts to this meeting today. The first is going to be an introduction about Survey itself. That will be done by me and Christina. And the second part is going to be a description of the announcement itself. That's going to be done by Amanda and Jake. And then the third part will be the Q&A, and that is going to be emceed by Sarah Noble. So with that, if we could move to the next chart, please, Ricky. Great, thank you. So, so what I want to do, like I mentioned, is talk a little bit about who we are. We are a virtual institute. I'm going to be sharing more about that in just a moment or so. But we're at the intersection of science and exploration. We're a global network of dispersed interdisciplinary researchers collaborating to address fundamental science and human exploration questions. And so we have a scope that includes NASA's top destinations for human explorers, focused, as we'll be talking about with this can on the moon, and then focused on what we can do in conjunction with Artemis, CLIPS, and other lunar-related efforts. Next chart, please. So I want to say at the outset that for this town hall, please submit questions to this link. That link should be in chat right now, and so I'd recommend downloading this, getting this aboard on your browser, so that you can either upvote or submit questions, anything that isn't there already. I want to also say that this presentation is going to be posted very shortly after this meeting at the Survey website, just survey.nasa.gov, and there's a Can for sticky on the front of the website. Just click on that, and you'll be able to get the presentation through that. I also want to note that after today's meeting, all questions and comments regarding the can must be submitted via the email address in the notice that came out that you all have seen. So this conference IO link will no longer work after today. So next slide, please. So we are, as I mentioned, a virtual institute. There are some unique attributes of this institute that we'll be discussing later that I think will guide you as you write your proposals, and that are important to take into consideration. We were started to advance lunar science and human exploration through cooperative, peer-reviewed teams. We support and develop the community. And historically speaking, we were founded originally as the NASA Lunar Science Institute, as many of you are aware, back in 2008, 14 years ago. And in 2013, we were updated to include research topics with NEAs and the Martian moons in response to where the administration was going with human exploration back in those days. Now, as we'll talk about, we have pivoted back towards an exclusively lunar focus with this announcement. This is based on a number of reasons, but primarily because that's the emphasis for NASA in terms of its human exploration program, as well as a large part of its robotics program. We have been jointly funded since our inception by HEOMD, now ESDMD, and ESMD originally, since the inception of the Institute, and have served as a bridge between these organizations since we started 14 years ago. We use the cooperative agreement funding model, which, and for a large number of reasons, that has served us well since the beginning. I want to highlight some notable differences between RNA grants and CERVI. So RNA grants are typically shorter duration, up to 3 years, and with some exceptions. Ours, as you've noted from our announcement, are 5 years. The RNA grants are typically smaller and focus on smaller research tasks, whereas ours are larger award amounts, and they also change oftentimes during the duration of the cooperative agreement, in response to changing direction and developing direction from NASA. And we also are focused on collaborative research, and a number of our efforts throughout our history have been developed at the intersection between teams. One thing that I want to highlight, and this was really developed by our distinguished scientist, Carly Peters, through discussions with our PIs, particularly last year, is that our agreements promote cooperation versus competition. They, as I mentioned, ensure stable and long-term funding, and so give a degree of efficiency to the operations. We also enable and promote early career scientists. That's one of the big emphases of CERVI, and has been since our inception, and they're flexible, and so they're able to respond to novel results. So if I could get the next slide, please. So currently, we have 12 overlapping domestic teams funded in 2017 and 2019. I'll be going over those in the next slide briefly. Each with cooperative agreements. We have over 1,100 publications since the Institute became CERVI back in 2013, and we have over 250 funded researchers and students. We also have 11 international partners. Christina is going to be talking about that portion of our portfolio in a little bit. And then the last major piece is, technical-wise anyway, is the Solar System TREX project, which is something that we have funded since the mid-2010s, a visualization tool for both missions and science. Then we also have our central office that Christina and I and a small team both serve in. And that provides leadership, overall institute direction, planning and management of the domestic teams, and also community development. Next slide, please, Ricky. This is a list of our current teams. I'm not going to go over these except to say that the ones on the left, the CAN 2 teams, are the ones whose agreements are ending this year, and replacing those or competing with the spots that are open by that is the reason for CAN 4. Our CAN 3 teams are going to be continuing for another little bit over 2 years, and so you can take a look at these at your leisure, or look at the teams via our website. Next slide, please. One thing that I really want to focus on with Survey is the breadth of our research. Now, this is a snapshot. This represents our CAN 2 and CAN 3 teams that you just saw in the previous slide. But we have research themes ranging from fundamental science all the way on the left to really exclusively human exploration tasks all the way on the right, and everything in between. Teams can be single topic focused. They can be focused on a number of topics that are interconnected together. So anyway, this gives, like I say, a snapshot of where we are right now. Next slide, please. This is our mission statement, our set of mission statements, which has remained more or less constant for the duration of our institute. So advancing human exploration of the solar system through scientific discovery is our core mission. Bridging the science and exploration communities is another important aspect of what we do. And then we have a strategic element to provide analyses, generally at the request of NASA headquarters, that are relevant to what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of this for the Artemis program in recent years. Being a virtual institute, we are continually exploring innovative ways of using IT and platforms that are available out there to bridge people that are in geographically disparate locations. That's been particularly useful during the pandemic. And then, as I mentioned, we train the next generation of explorers as a key part of our mission. Next slide, please. One of the things, as I mentioned, that really distinguishes Survey from a lot of other research efforts is that it's fundamentally collaborative. And we have expectations of our teams. This is a partial list. It's definitely not exhaustive. You can see the full list in the CAN, but I wanted to highlight some of the things that we do regularly with our teams. First of all, we have a monthly executive council meeting, which I chair along with Christina, and that serves as a forum for exchanging technical and scientific information. There have been research efforts that have spun out of those meetings. We also update the PIs and/or their deputies on various things happening at NASA that are relevant to Survey, and we do that in conjunction with our headquarters sponsors. We have each team at least once during its 5-year cooperative agreement will host a team site visit, and that is basically with the idea of creating potential research collaborations, as well as informing Survey management and headquarters partners the details of what's done on each team. We have an annual meeting, the Exploration Science Forum. I know many of you have participated in this in the past. I'm going to talk about that in a future slide. And we also request team members, not necessarily just the PIs, but members of their teams to serve on the science organizing committee for that meeting. We of course make scientifically useful information available, publications, obviously, data, and software, et cetera. And we provide routine reporting as well to highlight these innovations and publications. And then we support Survey's activities with regards to IDEA, the equity, accessibility, diversity, et cetera, for that we have a very large emphasis on, and which is going to be talked about a bit later by Amanda. Next slide, please. Community development is also a big part of what we do, and so we do things that involve Survey itself, but then we also support the community. This was particularly visible during the pandemic when we helped host a lot of meetings when people were not able to meet in person. But there's a number of other things that we do as well. So we have had community-led focus groups since the inception of our institute. Currently, we have three quite active groups on field analogs, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility that I was just mentioning on the previous slide, and volatiles. And then we have others as well that are somewhat less active. We have the annual Exploration Science Forum that I mentioned on the previous slide this year. It's going to be outside of a NASA center for the first time. It's going to be held in Boulder, Colorado at the University of Colorado, July 19th through 21st. And you're all invited. The program is currently under development, and we're going to be releasing that within the next few weeks. Along with this Exploration Science Forum, we support an event that's by and for graduate students that we've done also since the inception of the Institute to provide them with networking opportunities, experience in public presentations, et cetera. That's been just something I'm personally incredibly proud of in terms of developing the next generation. We support from Survey Central the NASA postdoctoral program. We have one or two postdocs that we regularly fund to bridge teams through a yearly solicitation. And then we also helped our European partners establish the European Lunar Symposium, and that's going to be held just next month, less than a month from now, May 24th through 26th. This year, it was decided that this is going to be an all virtual event. So next slide, please. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Christina Gibbs. Christina, please go ahead.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so I wanted to chat a little bit about some of the facilities associated with Survey. The facilities that are part of the program are available to the community. This isn't an insular Survey kind of a thing, but through the teaming and the funding and Survey Central ourselves, we have certain facilities that we do highlight and try to make available in different ways. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the regolith test bed that Survey Central manages at NASA Ames. And so this started over 10 years ago. We inherited a large amount of the JSC-1A, and we built a test bed that's been used on and off over the past decade. Most recently, Viper has been using that. And then through discussions with them and the understanding as we look to go to the South Pole, we also built a new test bed with over 20 tons of, it says 12, but it's actually 20, of anorthosite plus basaltic glasses mixed in. And Viper is using that right now, although another group is in fact sneaking in today to use it. So we have a lot of groups overlapping and working with this facility, and we think it's a really great community resource going forward as we get back to the moon. And so we really wanted to highlight this and let you know that if you are interested, you can reach out to us at Survey Central, and we'll put you in touch with Joe Manofra, who manages the facility for us. Next slide, please. Okay, another major part of Survey's history is this hypervelocity dust accelerator that Dr. Mihai Horanyi built at the Colorado University. It was developed in the first NLSI funding program, but over the past years, there's been continued development and expansion of capabilities with this. And to our knowledge, it is the most capable system that's available right now, and it is available for people to use. And so, you know, the latest things that they've been working on are some of the cryogenic targets and ice erosion, and they also have some gas targets and things like that. And I know that they'd be interested in collaborating if anybody was interested, and this is one of our CAN3 teams. Next slide, please. This last slide on facilities is a list of just some of the others that are associated, again, available to the community. I wanted to point out one of note, which is the Exolith Regolith Simulant Manufacturing Lab at the University of Central Florida. This is Dan Britt's team, the class team. And for years, they've been studying and testing different simulants. And they also now, you can purchase them and make them available and collaborate with them. And this is where we, in fact, purchased the anorthosite and basaltic glasses for our test bed. And so this is a great resource to the community if you find yourself in need of these various materials. But we also have these other facilities that are also available at different locations. And again, you can just reach out to Survey Central if you're interested in learning more about them. The version of this package that will be posted on the Survey website will have a link at the bottom, and that link will take you to the page. But if you just go to survey.nasa.gov, you can find our facilities there as well. Okay, next slide, please. So Greg mentioned that we have 11 international partners. International collaborations are very important to Survey, and in fact, as we were working through the very first cooperative agreement, we signed an agreement with Canada, and they were the first official team as part of Survey. And so we believe that we need to expand the community beyond the borders of the US, both to benefit our work that we do here by innovations that are being done in other countries, and also to share. So we highly encourage in your proposals collaborations internationally. What you see here on this chart is a representation of the 11 official international partners that Survey has signed agreements with. But many of the teams that we currently have and others that have proposed have collaborators built into their teams that are not from these 11 countries. I want to be clear that it's not required to partner with these. We highly encourage it. But if you have additional colleagues in different places and you have some collaborations that will enhance your proposal, by all means, you can include them. But I should also note, it's just a reminder that there are no funds exchanged for our international collaborators, and we cannot accept proposals with a PI and a lead institution that are international. So they must be collaborators in this. So next slide, please. I just wanted to take a moment to thank and acknowledge the work done by a survey review panel that was commissioned by Dr. Glaze last year. And it was also recommended in the midterm planetary decadal survey. And so we did have a survey review last year. And in fact, I saw at least, maybe more, but 4 of the panel members are on this call today. So I specifically want to thank them for all their efforts. This report is a really good overview. It has excellent findings and recommendations. And so we will be working with headquarters after the can is out to really start integrating their suggestions and looking to do this. I'd also like to say it was a really good opportunity for us at Survey Central to, while we were preparing materials for the panel, to look a little bit introspectively. And we identified some things that the panel also identified, but some others. So we're going to be working over the next 6 months to a year to improve survey, which was the whole goal of this. So thank you to everyone there. You can find the publication at the URL that is listed here. And again, this presentation will be available online, so you'll be able to get those if you're interested. So with that, I am going to ask for the next slide, and I'm going to welcome Dr. Amanda Naum, and she's going to kick off the section about the can specifically.
Thank you both, Christina and Greg, for the nice overview of survey. And now I'll be talking about what we are soliciting for in this upcoming can. So if you could please go to the next slide. So of course, we already talked about how survey is different, or how survey proposals are different than regular RNA proposals, and here we have a list of the requirements for those proposals, and some of these are, again, quite different than you would expect to find in a regular Roses call. So the first one there is, of course, a research plan, and I will talk a little bit about the objectives in a couple of slides, but we have listed specific objectives that we would like you to address some of in your proposal. Another one we have is the other institute objectives section. As you just heard, Survey does not only do research, there's other aspects to the institute. And so we've got, I think, about 5 different requirements within this section. So we are going to require an inclusion plan. We also have a separate idea plan, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a few slides. We will have a code of conduct. We have this science activation, citizen science, and public engagement plan, and also talking about how your work would relate to the survey mission. Of course, all proposals require a budget. We also have a requirement for a data and sample management plan. This again is similar to proposals that you would write for a Roses call in order to make the work that you, or the data that you produce during the course of your research, available to the public. If your proposal will have fieldwork components, there are 2 additional requirements that we have asked for. One of them is a code of conduct specifically for your field team. Because the situation or the environment of fieldwork is different often than what you might encounter during other types of research, we want to have specific code of conduct for while you are doing your field work. And the other aspect here is that there is a description of field work, of your field site, excuse me, that demonstrates a respect for the values of other users, and which is not limited to desecrating cultural sites or other significant sites. We have a science management plan. So these teams are quite large, and the programs, the proposals are long term. And so we want to know how you are going to manage all of the work that will be done and how you are going to work as a team. And lastly, we have a relevance section, of course, in which we ask you to address the relevance of the proposal to the institute. Okay, not only the type of research, but the other aspects, such as the other institute objectives. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. Another thing that makes survey proposals different is having demonstration of being a successful team. These teams are usually quite large, again, as I just noted. And so here are a couple of attributes that would make a successful team. So the proposed research is multidisciplinary and collaborative. And the proposal themes all relate to the overall research focus. You also will have innovative questions and approaches for scientific and/or exploration research. You will demonstrate an understanding and commitment of the PI and team to be an active participant in the other institute objectives, including things like hosting video seminars, workshops, involvement in surveys working groups, mentoring of students both within and outside of your team, any idea activities, as well as public engagement. And demonstrating a creative approach to inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible teams, supporting by strong codes of conduct for team collaboration and fieldwork, as well as what is included in your inclusion plan and your idea plan. Next, please. So section 1.3, as it currently stands in the draft can, lists the scientific objectives and exploration objectives that we are asking the proposers to address during in your proposal. And so we have two new things this year. The first one is the inclusion of the Biological and Physical Sciences Division. They will be contributing to the survey can this time around. And so I'll show you on the next slide what objectives relate to BPS related work. And we also have a specific list of objectives that Jake will talk about that ESD-MD is interested in. And so to go along with the agency's focus on going to the moon with Artemis, we are making sure that the majority of the work we are soliciting through this can is related to the moon. It's a little bit different than what we have done in the past, but we are going back to the lunar roots here and renewed focus on the moon. And so some of the things that we are included, this is not the same list, it's just a summary, include studies of the moon in general, studies of the origin and evolution of planetary bodies, the solar system and the universe, but the important part here is as informed by the moon. Obviously, there's a lot of information we can gain about those other objects from the moon. Lunar volatiles and permanently shadowed regions are of particular interest, as is lunar regolith, sample science, including returned lunar samples and lunar meteorites, and lastly, lunar dust. Again, just a reminder that this is a very short description of what we have for the objectives in section 1.3, so please be sure to read that area carefully to see what other aspects we've described for these particular objectives. Next, please. So some of the things that SMD's BPS, or Biological and Physical Sciences Division, is interested in is leveraging exploration of the moon in order to advance our understanding of fundamental physical laws, characterization of plant growth and development, in a lunar environment or non-Earth environment, effects of partial gravity using a regolith simulant, including analyses of the mineral composition of the simulant and extracts and composition in comparison, excuse me, to actual lunar samples, and acute and chronic effects on animals from being in space. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Jake for a couple of slides now. You
Right,
can
thanks,
go ahead.
Amanda.
Please. Thanks.
Okay, could we go to the next slide, please? So I'm Jake Bleacher. I previously worked for the Human Exploration Operations Mission Directorate, and now I work in Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. And so we are one of the contributors to the SurveyCAN. And here we list some of the research areas that we would have interest in, topics that any of our teams might propose. I would like to point out as well that most of these topics have fairly good synergy with the topics that Amanda also mentioned. So as Greg discussed early on, kind of the focus or a main goal of Survey is that synergy between the exploration with the science that's going on. So research that's intended to contribute to our human exploration side of things, we're really looking for results and products that help us increase utilization, efficiency, and effectiveness throughout the Artemis missions going forward. That's kind of that important part for us, is that it will help us do a better job when we get to conducting research throughout Artemis. Additionally, these research activities we hope will focus on human exploration and prepare the research community for future participation in Artemis moving forward. So again, we're looking at this as kind of a way to bring the community together and start thinking about how science and exploration work together as we move forward with Artemis to explore the moon. So I'll just quickly go over these research topics. The first one we're talking about is traverse planning. And so we're trying to develop a catalog of basically traversable pathways and target sites of interest in the South Polar region. So any team that is proposing to traverse planning would conduct research that helps us develop this list of potential locations and ways to get to those locations on the lunar surface. And we anticipate taking an active role in the exploration science forums throughout this CAN to try and continue to connect all the teams with the updates to what's going on in Artemis. So we can keep you well connected there and hopefully year by year help keep the research that we're doing here relevant to the planning that's going on within Artemis. The second topic is focused on permanently shadowed regions. So trying to help us characterize some of these shadowed and permanently shadowed regions. Again, we're trying to help understand what the environments will be like that our human exploration elements will have to traverse through or be exposed to in order to meet the science objectives that the community's given us. So that is the second one, lunar sample collection and sample handling operations. So how do we actually go about collecting samples on the lunar surface in a way that maintains the integrity of those samples and gives us the correct amount of information we need to do the right analyses back here on Earth? So again, that's more focused on the sample collection and handling operations, not the sample analysis itself. Characterizing of the physical and chemical regolith and dust properties is another topic we'd like to focus on. This is thinking, we mentioned PSRs, but in general, trying to help us understand how and if regolith properties throughout the polar regions might differ from what we have seen from Apollo in the equatorial regions. So the locations in the poles are exposed to variable amounts of light compared to what is the routine cadence of night and dark that we see in the equatorial region. So some of these places are permanently dark, nearly continuously sunlit, and every ratio of light and dark in between. So understanding whether or not we would expect different dust properties as we traverse throughout the South Polar region is important. Another topic is automated laboratory systems. So this is really getting at helping us define use cases for automated systems that would help us continue to do research on the lunar surface even when crew aren't present. And this could also include orbital platforms like the Gateway. So again, this is not developing the automated laboratory systems, but giving us some knowledge about what could be the use cases for these systems. So telling us what we think or what you think we might be able to do. And then the last one is planetary protection. This has a little bit of a Mars forward look for us, but we do have to think about it and test it on the lunar surface. So how do we understand our impact to the system or to the surface of the moon, as well as potentially in orbit at the Gateway? So these are the topic areas that we'll be focusing on. Next slide, please. I'll just bring this slide back, which Greg already showed and discussed to show the breadth of what's going on inside Survey. And the reason we want to show this one last time is to emphasize the point that we showed some exploration themes that could be included in a proposal, but you're not required to include an exploration theme in your proposal. Just like no one team does every single one of these topics here, you could have a solely science-focused research team that's proposed. But if you do plan to propose and indicate relevance to exploration, the list that I just went over is what we're looking to see for that. So I think with that, Amanda, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Thank you, Jake. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the specific sections that are different than you would see in a regular Roses Call proposal. So the first one here is the other institute objectives section, okay, and it includes 5 different subsections. And so we require an inclusion plan, an IDEA plan, a science activation, citizen science public engagement plan, a team code of conduct, and contributions to Survey and the NASA mission plan. And so the inclusion plan is becoming more and more common in SMD calls. And so there is some similarity between the inclusion plan and the IDEA plan, but the main difference between the two is who the focus is on. So the inclusion plan is talking about the team. Who is on the team? How can you create a more inclusive environment, among other questions. Whereas the IDEA plan focuses on the community. So how can we make the community more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable, and have better accessibility? The Science Activation Citizen Science Public Engagement Plan is also involving the community and getting the broader non-scientific community involved in survey research. We also are requiring a team code of conduct in which we ask you for requirements of expected behaviors and those sorts of topics within that code of conduct, and also how you will contribute to Survey and the NASA mission. So this is all relating, the last one is relating back to Survey's mission statement. So all of these items are going to be scored, okay, and we will be using them to discuss, or it's relating to selectability. And so I just want to note that this is new here. And so all of the other programs in Roses that have an inclusion plan, they are scored, but they are not used to influence selections. That is not the case for Survey. This is the first time SMD is trying out this using the inclusion idea plans as part of the score for selection. Now, this is going to be just a part of this one criterion, the other institute objectives. So in and of itself, an inclusion plan does not make one proposal selectable over the other. But just a note that this is the first time that we are actually using it as part of the merit criteria. Next, please. As I noted before, if your proposal has field work in it, we are asking for 2 additional documents. One is the statement regarding the fieldwork location, and the other is the fieldwork code of conduct. Fieldwork code of conduct is separate from the team code of conduct. All proposals are required to have a team code of conduct. Fieldwork code of conduct is separate and is additional if you have a fieldwork component to your proposal. The statement regarding the fieldwork location, again, is a demonstration of having respect for others that use your field site for a variety of in communities. The next, please. So, like most programs, this CAN is requesting or requiring a 2-step process. Okay, so step 1 proposals will be due, and then step 2 proposals will only be accepted by those who submitted a step 1 proposal. And so step 1 proposals will be evaluated by the program officers via the compelling nature of the proposed research plan and the appropriateness of its scope. Are you addressing the objectives that are listed in the CAN? Again, the relevance of the proposed research to SURVEY, SMD, and ESMD. Just a reminder that you do not need to have exploration or science in your proposal. It has to be either or some mix. The complementary of the PROS research plan program to those existing teams for CAN 3. Okay, and so this is going to be an encourage, discourage, step 1, I believe. And then step 2 proposals will be evaluated based on 5 criteria: the scientific and technical merit, the merit of the plan to support other institute objectives. So that includes the idea and the inclusion plan that I mentioned on the previous slides. The merit of the science management plan, merit of the data and sample management plan, and its cost reasonableness. Next, please. So some common themes we notice over proposals that have not been selected in the past are these here. Research themes that do not support NASA or SURVEY's overall research focus. So make sure that you look very carefully at the objectives in section 1.3. Lack of multidisciplinary and integrated approaches. Also, it's very important to make sure that your proposal includes all of the admittedly many requirements for the CAN. Any research that is duplicative of research funded by other NASA programs or organizations, or your proposal does not adequately address any of the or some of the other institute objectives. And so this is particularly difficult for those who are not as familiar with SURVEY because it is such a large part of the proposal score. So please do take a look at the SURVEY website, the NASA Senior Review document, any recorded talks, other resources to help you understand the Institute, as well as the introduction that Greg and Christina gave. Should help to understand what we're looking for a little bit more with the other institute objectives. Next, please. So here is a tentative schedule. So the draft can was released on April 19th. We are having the town hall right now on the 28th. The public comment period ends next week on Friday. Please submit questions after the town hall via the email that is located in the CAN documents. The final CAN release is targeted for summer of 22. We will be taking the comments and questions that we get from the town hall and through our emails and incorporating it or clarifying it as we see fit in the final CAN. So that is dependent on when we release the final CAN is dependent on that process. The step one will be due 30 days after the final CAN is released. And then step two will be 90 days after the final CAN is released. And here we have the link to the call itself, as well as the announcement number if you want to just search for that on NSPIRES. Next, please. Right, and then here we just have the list of everyone that is supporting the Survey CAN this time around. So we have Sarah and I for PSD, Kevin and his colleagues for BPS, Jake and his colleagues for ESD MD, and then Greg and Christina for Survey. Next, please.